Hi, this is Don Farber with VineyardSoft Corporation, and I'd like to welcome you to this training session on the creation of graphic alerts in the KnowledgeSync application. Please note that this is the first of 2 training sessions on this topic. Now, the ability to create graphic alerts, that is, bar charts, line charts, pie charts, and the like, was added to KnowledgeSync as of version 8.2. And for additional information about this capability, we strongly recommend that you refer to Chapter 12 of the KnowledgeSync manual. Now, to get started with the concept of graphic alerts, we're going to begin by taking a look at a sample chart. Here we're looking at a bar chart, and this chart is totaling up the overdue invoices that belong to the customers assigned to different sales reps. And so you can see down along the bottom, the X or horizontal axis of this chart is showing a list of sales rep names, and the Y or vertical axis is showing us a dollar value. Typically, every chart is going to consist of just those 2 components, the X and Y axis. Now, in KnowledgeSync, the content for a chart is created by a KnowledgeSync query. So our next step will be to take a look at the query that contains the content for this particular chart. So we're going to jump into the KnowledgeSync Navigator module. We're going to take a look at our ERP application, focus in on the AR or Accounts Receivable branch, and take a look at the pre-configured queries that exist for this application. Now, in KnowledgeSync, of course, queries can be used in multiple ways. The most common way a query is used is as the triggering mechanism for an event. But now, queries can also be used to gather the content for a graphic alert or chart. As such, we strongly recommend that any queries that are driving the content for a chart be so identified in the name of the query itself. As you can see in my case, I have 2 queries that are driving the content for a chart, and I've prefaced both of their names with the word chart. Let's take a look at the second of these queries. Now, this particular query is totaling the overdue invoice amount per sales rep. As such, just like any other query, we need to start out by identifying the tables that contain this information. Since I want to total up the amounts of overdue invoices, I need to retrieve data from my open invoice table. Likewise, since I need to display the name of the sales reps, I'm going to need to retrieve data from my salesperson table as well. Like any normal query, if you've chosen multiple tables, you do need to link or join those tables together. I'm going to stop next on the Columns tab. Remember I mentioned that every chart has just 2 elements of information within it. This is where you're going to be able to specify what those 2 data elements are. Since I want the query for this particular chart to total up the overdue invoices per sales rep, I need to choose the field that contains the invoice balance, which I have done as the first column for this query. Since I want KnowledgeSync to total up all of the overdue invoices per sales rep, I need to tell KnowledgeSync that I need it to total or summarize the value in this field. So I've changed the column type from normal to summarize. The second and only other column that's needed for this query is the group by value. That is, I want to group these invoice totals by salesperson. So in this particular case, I've chosen the salesperson's name as my second and only other column for this query. Now let's jump ahead a couple of more tabs to the Filters tab, because clearly I need to specify the criteria of the records I want to take into this chart's calculations. So I only want to look at those invoices that are past due. So my first filter is going to look at the invoice due date and make sure that it is less than the current date. Now, in this particular ERP application, there are some invoices that have no salesperson associated with them. And I don't wish to include that information in my chart. Therefore, my second filter specifies that the salesperson number is not equal to blank. My third and final filter is doing a date calculation. Using the calculation wizard in KnowledgeSync, this filter is calculating the number of days between an invoice's due date and the current date so that I can specify that I wish to retrieve only those invoices that are more than a certain number of days old. So let's take a look at the results of this query. My prompt for how many days old my invoices have to be will choose more than 90 days old, and the results of my query are exactly what I want. A total of overdue invoices for each of my sales reps. My query for this chart is done. Okay, now that we have the query designed, we can make use of it in a chart. So I'm going to shrink down my query definitions branch and instead go next to my chart definitions branch. I currently have two charts defined. The one that's going to use the query we just looked at is the second of these charts. I'm going to select the option to edit this chart. Now, every chart has a name. As you can see in my case, I'm calling this chart Overdue per Rep. You are able to choose from a vast variety of chart types. I mentioned a few earlier: bar charts, pie charts, and line charts. I'm going to change this particular chart into a bar chart. Depending upon the type of chart that you choose, you have additional formatting options available to you. And you'll notice the field called Display this chart's numeric data point values formatted as. So in this case, I'm totaling up invoices. That's a dollar amount. So I do, in fact, want to show this value as currency. If, for example, I were totaling up the number of units shipped of different items in inventory, I would choose one of the numeric formatting options. Now, right beneath that, I have the ability to choose the query that this particular chart is going to be using. And in fact, let's take this process from the very beginning. I'm going to click on my Add Query button, and I'll get a list of all of the queries for this application. I'm going to scroll down until I see my chart queries, and it is the second one that we wish to select. We do select it, and because this query has a filter in it that is parameter driven, I am prompted here to specify a value for that parameter. We're going to specify 90 days and hit OK. At the very bottom of this window, I have the ability to specify a title for my chart, as well as text for both the X and the Y axis of the particular chart. The vertical axis, or Y axis, is going to read dollars overdue, and my horizontal, or X axis, is simply going to show the salesperson name, and we've chosen that as our title. If we want to store this chart under a specific name, we can actually assign a hard-coded name to that output file, but that is completely optional. If left blank, KnowledgeSync will dynamically name that file. One of the best aspects of the graphic alerts module in KnowledgeSync is this verify/size chart button at the bottom of this window. It'll actually show us what this chart looks like. And we can adjust this chart. We can make it bigger or smaller. We can make it so that the labels down at the bottom have ample space between them. Once we're happy with the overall size, look, and feel of this chart, we can hit the Save Chart button. And right now, this chart is done. At this point, we can now assign or associate this chart to any of our KnowledgeSync events, just like a crystal report. But before we do so, let's just go back into this chart and take a look at some of the other formatting options that we have available to us. As I mentioned, a very popular chart type is a pie chart. So let's choose that. And now we have the ability to specify where the labels, that is the names of my sales reps, are going to appear. So a number of options here, as you can see. Let's choose Search Alert Labels, and let's have a look at the output of this chart to see how it looks. Okay, it looks okay, but not great. As you can see here, we're starting to get a little bit of overwrite of some of the values in this chart. So it would be probably better if I had these labels pulled out further from the actual pie chart itself. So let's exit from this chart. Let's change the labels aspect a little bit. Perhaps we want simply to have a legend on the right or left-hand side of this chart. Let's take a look at it now. That looks a little bit better. Now we're just seeing the dollar values, but instead of having the sales rep names right along with those values, those names are off in a legend of their own. That's quite satisfactory. Perhaps we should save that chart. Still another option for how those labels are handled. Perhaps we want those labels with lines. Let's take a look how this format works. In this particular case, we do have the lines leading to the labels, but once again, a little bit of overwrite happening here, so I think I'm going to be happier if I'm going to generate it as a pie chart to utilize a legend. We could also opt for what are called side labels. As you can see, just a number of different options here for how information is displayed based upon the type of chart being generated. So I like the look of this chart pretty well. Let's save this particular format and save this chart overall. So now we've created a chart, and so the last step is to assign or associate this chart to an event. So let's display our list of events for this particular application. So we've got an event down here that's looking at invoices that are overdue. That seems like a likely event to which it would help if I included a nice bar chart showing the total overdue invoices per sales rep. So let's expand the components of this particular event. Now, a chart is considered just like a report. It is one of the deliverables that can be associated with an event. And if we take a look at the deliverables that are currently configured for this event, we can see that it's configured to send out alerts via email, fax, text message, instant message, etc. But if we look at the second from the bottom here, we can see that there is, in fact, a chart associated with this particular event. Let's take a look at this chart. This is the chart that we just took a look at. And if we wanted to start this once again from the very beginning, let's remove all charts. Let's click on our Add Report button. Do note here, you're going to get a list not only of the charts associated with this particular application, but also of any crystal reports. So for example, our AR aging item that I've now highlighted is in fact a crystal report. We want to use the chart called overdue per rep. We're going to select that chart, and when we do so, just like a crystal report, we're able to specify the format that the chart is going to be produced in. The default is PNG. And the reason that is chosen as the chart default output format is that it is most efficient, most highly optimized, and will take up the least amount of room. But other chart output options are available to you, including the familiar GIF, JPEG, and bitmap. Now, when you associate a chart with an event, as we've done here, that chart can be delivered to the appropriate recipients via a number of methods. Just like a crystal report, we can specify that the chart is going to be included as an attachment to the outgoing email. The checkbox that's titled Include Reports as Email Attachments now applies to both crystal reports and any charts. And just like a crystal report that can be generated in HTML format and embedded right into the body of an outgoing email alert, a chart that is generated in PNG format, the default format, can appear right within the body of the email message itself. At this point, there are no additional steps that need be taken. We have created our query that gathers the content for our chart. We have created the chart itself using that query, and now we have configured an event to utilize that chart and to send it as part of the alert message contents. Again, we are now finished. So that wraps up this first training session on the creation of graphic alerts in KnowledgeSync. For the next session, we'll talk more about parameter-driven charts and how the contents of a chart can actually be driven off of the results of a query that's associated with an event. A fun topic. I hope you'll join us for that training session as well. Thanks very much for your time today. Again, this is Don Farber with VineyardSoft Corporation, and I look forward to speaking with you in a future training class. Thanks very much.